This International Workers' Day has seen alternative mobilisations as much of the world's workers remain on lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic. 1 million people worldwide have recovered from the novel coronavirus, according to Johns Hopkins University. The International Criminal Court has announced that the Israeli regime could be prosecuted for war crimes against Palestine. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Katrina Goss. May 1st, International Workers' Day, is traditionally observed with speeches, rallies and demonstrations across the world, despite not being observed as an official national holiday in the United States, where it originated. This year, the COVID-19 pandemic has meant most workers are stuck in their homes rather than taken to the streets to demand their rights. However, trade union movements across the world have found alternatives to mark the day.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, trade unions, popular movements, political parties and other associations called for virtual May Day demonstrations around the world to preserve people's health. In Greece, a government-ordered lockdown couldn't extinguish the May Day protest spirit, where demonstrators lined up 2 meters apart in careful rows in Athens' Syntagma Square. Organizers wearing masks and gloves used tape measures to set out exact positions for the protesters. Meanwhile, in Russia, traditional May Day parades were cancelled and trade unions took to the internet to mark the struggle for workers' rights under the slogan "Solidarity is stronger than infection." In Cuba, citizens followed the call made by President Miguel Díaz-Canel to sing the national anthem and mark May Day from their homes, complying with the social isolation measures to stop the spread of COVID-19. From early hours, houses, public buildings and workplaces raised the flag to pay tribute to workers, in particular those in the healthcare sector, and those who are overseas providing healthcare to fight the COVID-19 pandemic.
The Bolivian Congress has passed a law to hold general elections within 90 days. The Plurinational Legislative Assembly of Bolivia enacted the law on Thursday night, following the postponement of the 2020 general elections due to the coronavirus pandemic. The president of the Bolivian Congress, Eva Copa, issued the bill after the rejection and observation submitted by de facto President Janine Áñez of the bill previously drafted by the Supreme Electoral Tribunal. Former President Evo Morales, exiled in Argentina after he was ousted in a coup in November 2019, congratulated the members of Parliament through his Twitter account for reaching the decision. And meanwhile, security forces are repressing the population in the Bolivian city of El Alto. Many residents have protested to demand food and social assistance payments, which were promised by the de facto government in the context of the coronavirus lockdown, as well as free and fair elections. Thousands of graves have been dug in the Brazilian city of Sao Paulo as the country struggles to cope with the coronavirus outbreak. More than 13,000 graves have been dug at the city's Vila Formosa cemetery as the country prepares for more COVID-19 deaths. Burials have already begun at the mass grave, with cemetery workers in full protective suits seen carrying coffins and conducting short burial services whilst loved ones grieve. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has downplayed the threat of the virus, which he has previously described as a little flu. Brazil, the worst-hit country in Latin America, has reported more victims and confirmed cases than China, currently standing at over 87,000 cases and over 6,000 deaths. In the meantime, Rio de Janeiro's residents reacted after the local government extended the lockdown until May 11th to try to curb the spread of the coronavirus, while some people continue to ignore the recommendations and head to the beach.
I think it is fundamental to contain the epidemic, but taking into account that isolation is being absolute by concerning age groups, I think it could be reviewed so that the working class, which is not in the at-risk group, could return to work, because there is also an economic crisis there that is taking place. I know the economy is a concern, but life is unrecoverable. I already have a friend who died of COVID-19. I have other friends who have caught it and managed to recover. I am very worried about my mother-in-law. The most important thing is life, and you have to stay at home to avoid being infected.
The Peruvian Congress passed a law on Thursday allowing workers affiliated to private pension funds to withdraw up to 25% of their savings to support themselves during the coronavirus health crisis. Congress Chairman Manuel Molino de Lama stressed the move was an economic necessity for more than 6 million Peruvians who are waiting for help in a difficult economic situation due to the lockdown. Molino warned President Martin Vizcarra that the enactment of the law is based on constitutional order and that rejection of the bill by the executive would be considered unconstitutional. As of Friday, Peru continues to be the second hardest hit nation in Latin America, with almost 37,000 cases and more than 1,000 fatalities. More stories coming up after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. 1 million people worldwide have recovered from the novel coronavirus, according to Johns Hopkins University. However, the number of cases worldwide has surpassed 3.3 million, and more than 230,000 people have been killed by COVID-19. The United States continues to be the epicenter of the pandemic, with a death toll that has reached over 1.1 million, representing 1/3 of the global tally. In Europe, Spain has overtaken Italy as the most affected nation, with over 240,000 cases and almost 25,000 fatalities. In Asia, Turkey ranks first with over 120,000 cases and more than 3,000 deaths, while in Africa, Egypt has reported almost 6,000 cases and over 400 fatalities. Meanwhile, in Oceania, Australia leads with over 6,000 cases and 93 deaths. China's Hubei province, where the coronavirus outbreak started, will lower its emergency response level from Saturday as part of the latest relaxation of the restrictions put in place to contain the spread of the virus. The Deputy Governor of Hubei province, Yang Yunyang, said at a press conference that starting from May 2nd, prevention and control measures will also be adjusted following the downgrading of the emergency response level. According to health authorities, no new confirmed COVID-19 cases were reported in Hubei on Friday. Once the hardest hit Chinese province, Hubei has reported no new confirmed COVID-19 cases for 27 consecutive days since April 4th. Meanwhile, the forbidden city of Beijing, one of the most popular tourist sites in the country, was reopened at 30% of its capacity. US President Donald Trump said on Thursday that his hard-fought trade deal with China was now of secondary importance to the coronavirus pandemic and threatened to impose new tariffs on Beijing as his administration continues to blame China for the outbreak. Trump's rhetoric against China reflects his racism, as well as his growing frustration due to the economic impact of the pandemic and the criticism of his handling of the health crisis in what is an electoral year in the US. According to anonymous US officials, there is discussion on how hard to hit China at the same time as the US imports personal protective equipment from the country. In the face of the damaging consequences of the trade war with China, Trump signed a first phase of a multi-billion-dollar trade deal with the Asian nation in January that cut some US tariffs on Chinese goods in exchange for Chinese pledges to purchase more American farm, energy and manufactured goods. Tariffs of up to 25% remain on some $370 billion worth of Chinese goods. Despite President Donald Trump's claims he has evidence that the novel coronavirus was created in a lab in the Chinese city of Wuhan, the US Office of the Director of National Intelligence has concluded that the virus was not man-made or genetically modified. The information revealed the results of research carried out by the DNI on the origin of the COVID-19 virus. The statement issued on Thursday assured that there is broad scientific consensus on the natural origin of the coronavirus. Shortly after the report was published, Trump attended a press conference at the White House, where he once again blamed China for the outbreak, claiming to have seen evidence it originated in a Wuhan lab. Health workers clapped and cheered as a Spanish field hospital set up to deal with the coronavirus outbreak was dismantled. The Ephemera Conference Centre in Madrid, commonly used to host car shows, art fairs and concerts, was converted into Spain's largest field hospital to treat COVID-19 patients. Spain is cautiously easing lockdown measures as the numbers of new cases registered each day have dropped to around 300. Spain is the worst hit country in Europe and ranks second in the world in terms of the number of cases at almost 243,000, while it has seen over 24,000 fatalities. The Spanish authorities announced on Friday that the country's gross domestic product was projected to fall by 9.2% this year as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, while the unemployment rate is set to reach 19%.
Forecasts indicate a sharp contraction of GDP in 2020 of at least 9.2%, mainly due to the fall in domestic demand. In the first quarter of 2020, the unexpected shock of the COVID put an abrupt end to the positive growth cycle that had started in 2014. The scenario has completely changed, with negative implications for the activity.
With more than 27,000 COVID-19 deaths so far, the United Kingdom is set to be one of the worst hit countries in Europe, and it appears all but inevitable that the government's response to the outbreak will be subject to an inquiry. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and his government have been criticised not only for not stepping up testing, but also for moving slowly to impose a lockdown and for a lack of protective equipment for health and essential workers, sparking protests. According to a former head of the civil service, the scale of the coronavirus outbreak and the response it has required from government means a large-scale public inquiry is now inevitable in order to learn the lessons of the UK's response in case of another pandemic. Russian health officials have recorded almost 8,000 new COVID-19 cases since Thursday, bringing the total number in the country to over 100,000. Moscow remains the biggest outbreak hotspot, with roughly half of the identified cases. The death toll in Russia stands at 1,169, while over 13,000 people have recovered. On Thursday, Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin tested positive for the coronavirus and announced that he was self-isolating. And we're taking one final break now, but stay with us for more. Welcome back to From the South. The International Criminal Court has announced that the Israeli regime could be prosecuted for war crimes against Palestinians. ICC Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda reiterated on Thursday her position, affirming the statehood of Palestine, granting the court's jurisdiction to probe Israeli war crimes against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, the besieged Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem. The announcement was welcomed later in the day by the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which stated that it trusted that the facts of this issue will prevail and that the long-awaited investigation into war crimes committed in the territory of the State of Palestine will soon be launched. Israeli helicopters launched missile attacks against a number of military positions in southern Syria, causing limited material damage, according to Syrian state media. The aircraft bombed sites in the Quneitra and Dara provinces early on Friday morning after approaching from the occupied Golan Heights and firing some 5 missiles, according to official sources. A number of unconfirmed reports said the targets included militias allied to Damascus, such as Hezbollah, in addition to the Syrian military. Known to carry out frequent cross-border bombing raids in Syria, the last Israeli attack came on Monday, killing up to 3 civilians and wounding several more, according to the Syrian Arab news agency. The strikes launched from Lebanese airspace triggered Syria's air defense systems, which intercepted a number of missiles. The COVID-19 death toll in Iran increased by 63 in the past 24 hours to reach 6,091 fatalities. Health Ministry spokesman Kinish Jahanpur, speaking on state television on Friday, explained that the figure represented a slight fall from the 71 deaths reported the previous day. Iran is cautiously easing its lockdown, allowing residents to return to shops, bazaars and parks over the past week. With a population of 80 million, Iran has suffered the largest death toll in the Middle East and reported more than 95,000 positive cases. Africa continues to see an increase in coronavirus cases, although the numbers have not overtaken those of the rest of the continent. Egypt, South Africa and Morocco are the worst hit countries in the continent, while only the Kingdom of Lesotho has escaped the pandemic so far. Our correspondent Oscar Epirdi brings us the details.
Good afternoon. In East Africa, we are still in a critical period and it's difficult to know how harmful the infection will be. We highlight the good things. In Kenya, for instance, they have invested in 15 laboratories and the capacity to make thousands of tests daily. The government has announced the beginning of massive testing. Today, they found 15 new cases. We highlight as well the big amount of patient recoveries in African countries. Not to speak about Madagascar and its concoction made of artemisia and other medicinal herbs. 92 out of the 128 patients got cured without any death. It's a source of hope because otherwise the virus continues propagating and the numbers could go mad and out of control any day. The new 187 cases, positive cases of the last official report in Tanzania bring a big question about what the real situation is there. Also in Somalia, where they have already reached the point of 600 infected people, bringing another question about the capacity of its health infrastructure. The health of your neighbor is your health, so Kenya and Uganda or Rwanda, they are in the same Africa, sharing the future.
South Africa took its first steps towards rolling back one of the world's strictest COVID-19 lockdowns on Friday as it sought to strike a balance between containing the virus and reviving its economy. 5 weeks ago, President Cyril Ramaphosa ordered most of the population to stay at home and closed all but essential businesses as part of a response to the pandemic that has won praise from the World Health Organization. South Africa has reported more than 5,600 coronavirus cases and 103 deaths out of a population of 58 million, representing relatively low numbers compared with pandemic hotspots in Europe or the United States. The economic impact of the pandemic has been severe, as the National Treasury forecasted a 5.8% contraction this year. The Rwandan government will allow limited movement of people and restricted openings of some businesses, including restaurants and hotels, from next Monday as it starts to ease its coronavirus lockdown. According to a government statement released late on Thursday, movement between provinces in the Central African country will still be prohibited, while schools will also remain shut until September. Rwanda, a country that has experienced an unprecedented economic boom in the last decade, implemented some of the strictest lockdown measures in Africa to help slow the spread of the coronavirus, including closing all but the most essential businesses. As of Friday, the country had reported 243 confirmed COVID-19 cases and no deaths. Kenya has reported 396 confirmed coronavirus cases and 17 fatalities.
Let us not drop our guard, keep our vigilance, and strictly adhere to the measures that have been put in place. That is the only weapon that we have to prevent us against this pandemic. And I'm certain if we continue in this path, that we shall be able to beat this enemy.
And in the context of International Workers' Day this Friday, we end this news brief with a version of the workers' anthem, the Internationale, produced by the Latin American and Caribbean Confederation of Public Sector Workers. Don't forget to follow us on social media and to check out our website for all the latest news. For Teleso English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching and happy May Day.